That's an example of normalizing things for good or bad.
In 2012, the impact Pretty Little Liars had on its demographic was impossible to miss. You could spot the books a mile away, recognizable by the brightly colored covers with the distinctive dolls, and they lined the YA shelves at every Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and even Borders for a few years before they went out of business. You couldn't buy EOS or Maybelline Baby Lips at the drugstore without seeing Lucy Hale's face plastered on a teen magazine. And if you weren't on BuzzFeed trying to find out if you'd be a vampire or a werewolf, or which Hunger Games district you'd be in, you were taking a quiz that would tell you which Pretty Little Liar you were. Or retaking it if you got Emily. The series revolves around 4 former best friends, Hannah, Aria, Spencer, and Emily, who reunite 1 year after the disappearance of their mean girl best friend, Allison, and begin receiving threatening text messages from an anonymous person who knows their secrets. I'll give it to them. It was a cool premise for a teen drama, and its timing could not have been better. Between the premieres of Pretty Little Liars' first and second seasons, there was a 44% increase in Americans owning smartphones. This was the age of the Samsung Galaxy S and the Motorola Droid Razor, a time where we still called them smartphones, and this was Apple's latest model. Revolving teen shows around the rising wave of social media and new tech was far from a tried concept. While Gossip Girl was the first popular teen drama to put an anonymous antagonist behind a phone, Pretty Little Liars struck a darker tone that leaned into mystery with a small-town setting and a way cheaper budget. Pretty Little Liars had everything a great teen drama has. Memorable main characters with distinct styles, good conflict, some relatable, some outlandish, a solid balance between drama and humor, strong friendships, and, of course, romance. But in the past couple of years especially, the show has come under fire for its depictions of underage relationships between the main characters and their love interests, which involve large age gaps, predatory dynamics, and a notorious teacher-student relationship. These fictional relationships were irresponsibly romanticized, normalized, and perpetuated by the show and the people behind it. And, well, they shouldn't have been. We're going to analyze these couples, their foundations, dynamics, and effects, and how the show manipulates their young audience into actually rooting for them. We're going to talk about who let this happen, why no one stopped it, and why all of a sudden people seem to care now. But before we begin, a disclaimer. If you're distressed by any of these topics, please do not watch this video. We're going to be diving pretty deeply into deconstructing the elements of some of these relationships, including their power dynamics and the grooming process as it applies to them. Of course, I want to stress that all thoughts and opinions are my own. Unless I have accompanied screenshots, consider everything alleged. Sources and additional resources are linked below. And lastly, there will be spoilers for the following. These will come sporadically, but mostly as they pertain to the specifics and trajectories of the underage relationships. I won't really get into storylines beyond that, especially for Pretty Little Liars. I'll be honest, this show's plot and I lost each other a long time ago. Pretty Little Liars unfortunately falls into that category of shows that begin decently, sometimes even incredibly, but somewhere along the way lose themselves and spiral into absurdity. This is usually because the writers write themselves into a corner, keep raising the stakes to the point of disbelief. Or most tragically, they pull a narcissist and stare a little too deeply at their own fandoms online, which influences their writing in all the wrong ways. It's a slippery slope, all I'm saying. And it creates scenes like this.
You know, my mom always said Christmas was wherever we were, as long as we were together.
And we are. Together.
And with that note, let's begin. Alloy Entertainment always intended for Pretty Little Liars to be a show. Before they were acquired by Warner Bros. In 2012, they were just a book packaging company. But even then, TV was a huge part of their business model. Basically, they'll take a trend that's big with teenagers and create the bones of an idea around it and turn it into a book and then a TV adaptation. Like The Hunger Games supposedly inspired The 100, the Twilight Saga inspired The Vampire Diaries. Pretty Little Liars was inspired by Desperate Housewives. CEO and president Leslie Morgenstein saw the show's success and wanted to create something similar. The bones idea they came up with, according to Morgenstein, was 4 best friends start getting tormented from their 5th best friend who went missing years earlier. From there, they hired Sarah Shepard, who had allegedly ghostwritten a Gossip Girl spin-off book, to build from that idea and write Pretty Little Liars. By doing this in-house, Aloy has the control, the IP, the film and TV rights, and there were a lot of ideas for what the show would be like. There was a pitch that made the liars adults. There was a pitch that kept them as teenagers, but the plot was completely different from the books. None of them seemed to be the right fit. Enter Marlene King, or Marlene King, but we will refer to her as Marlene King. She had a pitch that stayed fairly true to the first book, and they went with it. The information on Marlene King online is shockingly sparse. She broke into the industry through her script Now and Then, which sold and became a movie in 1995. Like Pretty Little Liars, the plot centers around 4 girls, all best friends, all going through different problems. It's coming of age, it's about girlhood, there are some spooky small-town vibes. There are parallels. Marlene King is the showrunner of all 7 seasons, meaning she arguably had the most creative control of the series. Because of that, and because of her involvement from the start, she gets the brunt of attention from the fandom, both positive and negative. I do want to note that though she is the showrunner through the entire show, she's not the only one. Oliver Goldstick is a lesser-known name within the fandom, but a pivotal player behind the scenes. He was co-showrunner with Marlene King for seasons 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And Charlie Craig, a co-executive producer of The 100, who joined for the last season. The pilot's premiere ranked number 1 in the 12 to 34 female demographic and generated 2.47 million unique viewers, making it an instant hit. In the pilot, the girls all have individual storylines. For 16-year-old Aria, she meets some college grad named Ezra in a bar before school starts. They hit it off and make out in the bathroom. But on the first day of school, Aria realizes that Ezra is her English teacher, Mr. Fitz. Unfortunately, they don't end it there. Look, I don't want to underplay anything. Aria and Ezra's relationship, or Ezria, was incredibly popular with fans. I'm talking blogs, fan fiction. I can't even count how many 1,000 Years by Christina Perry grainy edits there are of them on YouTube. There is a lot of debate on Ezra Fitz's actual age. In the books, I don't think Ezra's age is explicitly stated, but he's assumed to be in his early 20s, presumably at least 22 because we know he graduated from college. The general consensus in the fandom, as stated on forums and the show's fan-made wiki page, is that at the start of the show, Ezra Fitz is 22 years old. I can't find a particularly valid source to back this up. I don't know if someone attempted the math with the show's skewed timeline or what, but 22 seems to be the popular number floating around the fandom. However, it is inaccurate. In the pitch document that Marlene King created, Ezra Fitz is 25 years old. In the pilot's script, his age is lowered to 24, and that seemed to stick in the 2 drafts I managed to get my grubby little hands on. The most recent revision dated a month before they shot the pilot, so, I think it's safe to speculate that that's close to, if not the final draft. In both of these versions, Aria is 16. I don't think I could find a more accurate or canonical source than the script. Not that anyone who worked on the show is going to jump at the opportunity to correct the socially somehow more acceptable 22. But honestly, all of this splitting hairs over Ezra's age is really just beside the point. The point, of course, being that he is an adult in every version. And it's a little disturbing, the notion that adults could have potentially sat down and tried to find the sweet spot between a plausible high school teacher's age and what age would be deemed too creepy to sleep with a 16-year-old and still be romanticized on network television. Now, Aria and Ezra's relationship gets the most attention due to its popularity, longevity, most of Aria's arcs revolving around him, and the added taboo element of the teacher-student dynamic. But it is far from the only instance of a minor having a romantic relationship with an adult on Pretty Little Liars. Shout out to ABC Family.
It's a family show! Or is it?
I added as many as I could find and made a wheel. 13 is the number I ended up with. 13 adult minor relationships on this show. And honestly, there could be more. I may have missed a few. It's horrifying, but I think there are more underage relationships on this show than not. We can't get into all of them because this video would be 10 hours long, and I'd have to rewatch the whole show, which I'm not going to do. But before we really dive into Aria and Ezra's relationship, and trust me, we will, I want to first focus on a more underrated but also deeply problematic relationship from the show. In fact, from the first 3 episodes. Step up Spencer Hastings and Wren Kingston, the most stereotypically British-sounding last name I've ever heard. As consistently listed in every official script, revision, pitch, and treatment that I could find, Wren is 24 years old. Oh my god, twins? That really seems to be the lucky number, right next to 16, which conveniently is Spencer's age. Quite blatantly, Wren and Spencer's fling, situationship, whatever you want to call it, tracks the grooming process to a T. This is a pattern of grooming outlined by Rain. Using this and a few different resources, all linked below, we are going to go over these actions and scenes in a different light than the show would perhaps prefer us to see them in. So let's start with their first ever meeting. Melissa, Spencer's 22-year-old sister, is home with her fiancé, Wren, who Spencer hasn't met yet. So basically, Spencer has converted the barn into a loft to move into for her junior year, a reward for getting good grades and giving up her summer for an internship. But Melissa breaks the news to Spencer that she and Wren are moving into the barn for the fall while her place in the city gets redone. Naturally, this causes some friction. In the middle of this argument, Wren comes out and greets Spencer.
Is everything okay? I'm Wren.
Upset, she doesn't acknowledge him. She storms off, but we stay with Melissa and Wren. Pretty uneventful first interaction, but after Spencer leaves, we are shown this.
Sounds like she was counting on moving into the barn.
Don't worry about Spencer. She'll get over it.
This is significant. Spencer doesn't hear him. She's not supposed to. This line is meant for us, the audience, to show us that Wren is caring, that Wren is a nice person. They want us to like him. At the same time, they want us to not like Melissa. Keep in mind, this isn't to throw us off so they can set up a big plot twist where we realize he's actually a creep. The show pretty much always wants us to like Wren and think he's a good guy. In their next interaction, Wren approaches Spencer outside while she's reading. He puts out his cigarette.
Does my sister know you smoke?
Does she have to know everything?
The double entendre is not subtle, but it is effective. On one hand, he's clearly flirting, but with low stakes, suggestive towards Spencer without really committing to it. Just testing the waters, testing Spencer's reaction. If Wren needed to, he'd be able to backtrack from this comment and chalk it up to its primary meaning. Does Melissa have to know that he smokes cigarettes? And with that comment, they effectively share a small secret. They don't pinky promise or anything, but it's understood by the audience and the characters that Wren's cigarette habit is a lightly established secret between them. Something that Spencer knows that Melissa doesn't. And this little secret may seem harmless and inconsequential, but in reality, this is exactly how predators gain trust over their victims. Lightly at first, again, just testing the waters. According to Rain, abusers attempt to gain trust of a potential victim through gifts, attention, sharing secrets, and other means to make them feel that they have a caring relationship and to train them to keep the relationship secret. Wren does this constantly in their scenes together, and again in this one only a moment later when he tells her he's sorry about the loft. It's kind of infuriating because if it was self-aware at all, it would actually be really good writing, but I digress.
Does she have to know everything?
The next time they're alone together, they're wearing a lot less clothing. Wren is coming into the house from getting out of the jacuzzi, and Spencer is about to go in the jacuzzi. They meet in the middle in the kitchen. Ironically, Wren's actions follow the exact order of the quintessential grooming pattern outlined by Rain. After beginning to gain Spencer's trust through attention and sharing secrets, he establishes physical contact under the guise of helping Spencer with her sore shoulder.
You probably have a fluid buildup in your bursa sac. I can help.
Rain says, abusers will often start to touch a victim in ways that appear harmless, such as hugging, wrestling, and tickling, and later escalate to increasingly more sexual contact, such as massages. Even more damning, Wren backs away immediately when Melissa calls for him because he knows his behavior is inappropriate. And here's a fun fact, in the script, this scene actually takes place in the jacuzzi. In their next interaction, Spencer, Melissa, their father Peter, and Wren go out to dinner together. Wren and Spencer sit across from Melissa and Peter, our first subtle indicator that this dinner will separate the group into two different sides. The waiter comes to take their drink orders.
I'll have a vodka soda. She's kidding.
Yeah, actually, we'll have a vodka soda.
And then, when the drinks come, this happens.
I've already been nominated to serve on the business school's leadership committee.
By surreptitiously sharing his drink with Spencer, Wren is not only giving a 16-year-old alcohol, but he's also gaining her trust and establishing another secret between them that further separates Spencer from her family. Melissa suggests they play this horrible game, high-low, where each person names their greatest achievement of the day, and the most impressive one wins. When Spencer can't come up with something, Wren interrupts.
I got a brilliant parking spot today, right in front of the chem lab.
So this dinner is especially significant because from the get-go, even before the game is even brought up, Wren establishes a very us versus them mentality with Spencer against Melissa and their dad. Throughout the scene, Wren has sidebars with Spencer, constantly tries to make her laugh, and actively gauges her reactions. Their next on-screen interaction takes place at night. Wren comes into Spencer's room while she's studying and offers to give her another massage.
Should I give you another rub?
No, that's okay.
He flirts with her, blatantly checks her out. Then he offers to help her study. Wren tries to connect with Spencer emotionally, pointing out the pressure her family puts on her, which can be interpreted as another attempt to isolate her from them.
You know, I didn't grow up in a family like yours, so I don't know that kind of pressure, but I could imagine it could be unbearable at times.
Spencer views this differently.
I'm sorry I'm being intrusive.
No, you're being nice.
No, he's not. Then Wren moves closer to Spencer and kisses her. Though Wren's actions are predatory, he's never portrayed as a predator. The show appears to minimize his actions or deliberately present them as organic. Like, Wren didn't randomly try to give Spencer a massage. He saw that her shoulder was hurting, and he wanted to help. Wren giving Spencer alcohol was not premeditated. She was the one who ordered it first. He was just being nice. Wren was on his way to do laundry before he just happened to walk by Spencer's room and spontaneously decided to come in. These little details make a difference in the audience's perception. Portraying Wren in a light that makes the viewer like him and never doing anything significant to change that is harmful to underage viewers. Whether the writers are aware of it or not, this is how groomers operate. I wouldn't be surprised if the writers didn't view these interactions this way. But what matters the most isn't how the writers interpret Wren and Spencer's relationship. It's how the young audience does, something that was never taken into account in the ways that it should have been. Because I don't think the viewers from watching the show would see those scenes in the same way that I just described them. I know I didn't, but still, they register what's in front of them. The audience sees these actions. They see Wren, a man in his 20s, appear to care about Spencer, a 16-year-old girl who they may identify with. They see Wren ask Spencer about herself and show interest and sympathy toward her complicated home life and relationship with her family members. They see him give her a massage. They see him sneak her alcohol. They see him kiss her. They see him seem to really care about her. And the audience likes him because they're supposed to, because he's cute and English and they're not shown not to. And yeah, it's just a show. But what happens if those actions play out in the viewer's own lives? What if a predator goes through the pattern of grooming them through actions that completely mirror Wren's? By showing concern, by flirting, by establishing little secrets in physical contact, by giving them alcohol. What is a teenager supposed to make of that when those exact actions were not depicted negatively on their favorite show? As far as they're told, the only problem with Spencer and Wren's relationship is the fact that he's engaged to her sister. Without that factor, what reason do they have to think that Wren is a creepy guy, or by extension, the adult that's grooming them in their own lives? The question then becomes, could a child from watching these scenes become desensitized to these actions in real life? Does Pretty Little Liars prime young viewers to be groomed by predators? I want to be clear. There is nothing inherently wrong with fictionally depicting a teacher-student romantic relationship on television. The same goes for adult-minor relationships. Yes, if they're executed irresponsibly, these plotlines can have damaging effects on the audience. More on that later. But if done responsibly, they can be educational, compelling, and yeah, even entertaining. Determining the morality of these fictional relationships boils down to how they are portrayed, and what the audience takes away by the end. Pretty Little Liars was already in an even more sensitive position than other shows because a substantial portion of their target demographic is teenagers. The series had more of a responsibility to handle these relationships with care for their impressionable audience. That didn't stop them from doing the complete opposite. In Aria's character description, it says, she's seen more of the world than most Rosewood teens and possesses maturity beyond her years. They really hit her with the mature for your age card. In all of the documents I've been able to find, this specific word always seems to come up. Aria is mature. It's almost as if they use this as a way to justify the relationship, as if her living in Iceland for a year means that she possesses some hidden knowledge, as if being mature for her age changes her age. There's a lot wrong with this. I'm not saying Aria is not mature, but often someone may seem more mature than their age because they have to be, because they have trauma. When we meet Aria, she is, whether she or Marlene King realizes it or not, in a very emotionally vulnerable position. Her best friend disappeared a year ago. She isn't close with her friend group anymore. She's been manipulated by her father to keep his affair a secret, in her eyes to protect her mom. She often provides parental support to her younger brother and emotional support to her mom in a way that a child shouldn't have to. While these factors make Aria more mature, they also make her an easier target to be preyed upon. I don't particularly care if Marlene King notices these things or not. I care about the young viewers who may see their own similarities reflected in Aria, similarities which may already suggest they're easier targets to predators. These young viewers who then possibly assume, by extension, that they are mature enough for romantic relationships with adults. And let's talk about that phrase. Mature for your age, old soul, wise beyond your years. They're all the same thing. To young people, it's the ultimate compliment, isn't it? It goes hand in hand with intelligence, but there's a uniqueness factor to it. Something special, inherent, something that the other kids just don't get. But it's not really a compliment, though. That's not the right word. A more fitting word is praise. Because where a compliment is an expression of admiration, praise is an expression of approval. Approval that can only be bestowed by an older or wiser person, someone who has the authority to gauge what mature means. Herein lies another skewed power dynamic. In the 5th episode of the 1st season, Ezra invites Aria to his book reading at a bar. Ezra's roommate from college, Hardy, surprises him and meets Aria, who introduces herself as Ezra's student. When Aria leaves the group to get water, Hardy warns Ezra against their relationship.
When this is all over, she's gonna get her diploma, you're gonna get a pink slip and an orange jumpsuit.
When Aria returns, Ezra acts distantly toward her, like he's embarrassed by her age. Later, he makes a condescending comment that reinforces this.
So are all college boys like the ones in that bar?
Well, maybe when you go to college, you'll find out for yourself.
Why would he? I was just having fun at a bar with a high school student.
You make it sound so awful.
Well, maybe it is.
The problem with this dialogue is that Ezra doesn't consider himself. The focus is on Aria, like she's lacking something, like she's not good enough. Like her age is a stain that reflects poorly on her character, as if it's some kind of scarlet letter. When in reality, the focus should be solely on Ezra's actions, and all of the ways he's wrong for pursuing his 16-year-old student. This goes back to this idea and illusion of maturity.
Was I acting like a high school girl? Did I do anything to embarrass you?
This puts Aria in another unbalanced dynamic where she's constantly seeking his approval that only Ezra can give because he is the age that she can only mentally try to be. This is another example of how foundationally unequal their relationship is. Not only does the show romanticize problematic relationships, but they then push these relationships onto the audience. Ezra and Aria's relationship is portrayed in a way to make the viewers root for their relationship. The show often does this through perception framing. Perception framing is the deliberate use of narrative structure, audio-visual elements, and cinematography in television and film to provoke specific emotional or cognitive responses in order to shape the audience's perception of the content, characters, or story. What we have to consider are the show's intentions. In this context, what do they want you to think of the relationships, and how can they make you feel that way? Let's look at a subtle example first. We know that music is played in television and film to establish a mood or elicit a specific emotion from an audience. The type of music that plays tells the audience what they should feel. In many scenes where Aria and Ezra are alone together, romantic songs play in the background. There's nothing accidental about these songs in the show. To use pre-existing music in TV, production companies have to get permission, multiple licenses on top of fees and royalties. So these song choices, they're deliberate and thought out because they have to be. But the show doesn't just use other artists' songs. They also hired composer Michael Subi to create an original soundtrack score for the show. Some of these songs have to do with Aria and Ezra's relationship, and shocker, they're mostly slow instrumental melodies. Some of these include Life with Ezra, Aria and Ezra Say Goodbye, Kissing Aria, Aria and Ezra's Theme. I'm sorry, Aria and Ezra's Theme? Their own The Phrase song from the pilot wasn't enough? They have to have their own theme song too? And just for the record, none of the other main couples have their own official theme song. Let me reiterate, one of the companies paid someone to compose these love songs to play over scenes with Aria and Ezra. Okay, let's look at a more overt example that has to do with narrative. The show presents Aria as the pursuer. After they realize that Ezra is Aria's teacher, Aria is the one who still wants to make it work, while Ezra is hesitant.
Are you here to ask about the homework assignment?
Do you have plans this weekend?
I'm thinking we should talk about the homework assignment.
She knows what she wants and she doesn't care about the rules. She rebuffs Ezra's ethical arguments at every turn because, hey, age is just a number and love conquers all. I wish I was being hyperbolic, but this is quite literally the show's logic. In the character descriptions for casting, it says, Aria is determined not to let Ezra go without a fight. Aria's conviction and persistence may make it seem like this relationship is fully consensual, when in reality, the adult is the one with the power. But the show never sets this record straight. To contrast framing, let's take a look at this scene from Netflix's You.
I can show you my short.
We're friends, and it's cool. You're also 15, so we're not hanging out in my house alone.
What is his game here?
I'm not some random girl child.
All right, fine, but you have to promise me you're not going to tell anybody that you were here alone with me.
Scout's honor.
This is his clever trick to make her feel safe, like she chose.
Unlike this scene, there is no acknowledgement of the power dynamics or manipulation. It's actually incredibly ironic because both shows were produced by the same production company. Framing Aria as the pursuer could lead viewers to believe that minors have the same level of power and agency as adults. Not only is this dangerous for the viewers in their own lives, but translated to the real world, this could lead to doubting or blaming the victims who come forward against their abusers. While Aria is determined, Ezra, on the other hand, is initially more resistant to the prospect of continuing something romantic with Aria.
Can I come in?
I'm not sure if that's a good idea.
He's the one with ethics on the mind. Because Ezra's a good person, fighting the deep feelings he has from talking to her for like half an hour in that bar. In his character description, it says, he can't believe she's only 16, and he tries, but not too hard, to dissuade her from pursuing their relationship. Ezra's reluctance is not just there to build suspense, although it does add to the illicitness of their relationship. But really, it's likely his hesitation is there to frame him as a good guy in a tough situation. And, well, really to make him look less creepy. Because imagine how blatantly predatory it would come across if he wasn't at all deterred by her age. The morality of their relationship is very uniquely presented. For Ezra's reasons against dating Aria, they pretty much stick to this dialogue. I'm your teacher. You're my student.
I'm your teacher.
And this isn't right.
But it's not right.
And I could get in trouble. They don't go much deeper into why the relationship is wrong. Aria's rebuttal is almost always a variation of, but this feels right, and I don't care what the world says.
I know it's not just me. Hey, you feel like this is right for us too.
It's an argument of logic versus emotions, laws versus ethics. Aria doesn't care what the world thinks. She knows this is bigger than that, and Ezra knows it too.
In theory, we are a lot more wrong than we are right.
You want to be real? Forget about theory.
A protagonist going against the rules to do what in their heart they know is right. Why does that sound familiar? Maybe because we've seen it 100 times. There are countless films in which daring characters challenge laws, rules, norms, what society, in whatever form it takes, deems as acceptable. These characters know the odds are against them, and they have a lot to lose, but they persist because they know they're doing the right thing. We see this thematic structure applied again and again, but we never tire of it because the themes are so human. These are stories of bravery and courage and what it means to be good. Individuality and nonconformity are messages we grew up with. We're receptive to these stories and warmly familiar with them. And that's a good thing. They're important. They bolster powerful topics. Classism, sexism, racism. homophobia, indoctrination, and oppression. They strengthen our values and they inspire us. So for Pretty Little Liars to use that exact paradigm to promote a teacher and his student fighting for their relationship, like it's an act of integrity, like it's something to be admired, is so disturbing. Whether they intentionally take advantage of the audience's familiarity with the structure is unclear, but either way, they benefit from it. We're conditioned to root for these characters. And I don't know, there's something so sinister about it. Using something that's used for good, making something bad out of it, and then masquerading that thing as good to an audience that isn't used to questioning it. It's desecrating to these stories that actually stand for something. While we're familiar with protagonists fighting the odds, we're also used to seeing them pitted against antagonists. It seems that every adult that disapproves of Aria and Ezra's relationship is framed as a villain. Take the character Jackie, for example. Jackie is introduced at the end of season 1 as Ezra's ex-fiancé. She finds out about the relationship. Instead of, calling the police, she plots to break them up so she can get Ezra back. This 16-year-old becomes her enemy and her competition. She then uses the same demeaning language to insinuate that Aria is not mature enough for Ezra.
College will be a great experience for you. It really helps you grow up. You'll look back and realize just how naive you were.
Of course, the lens, once again, is not on Ezra for pursuing a kid, but on Aria for being a kid. All of this narrative framing plays into romanticizing Aria and Ezra's relationship. There are other factors in place that help make this relationship more digestible. Like during the filming of season 1, Lucy Hale was 20 and Ian Harding was 23. So even though viewers are cognizant of their characters' ages, visually it's not as jarring because the actors are both adults and closer in age. In reality, this is what Lucy Hale actually looked like as a 16-year-old. This is from an episode of Ned's Declassified where she played a small role. I mean, she looks so young. That's a kid. That is a child. And this is what she looks like next to a 25-year-old Ian Harding. Now, to be fair, I don't believe the actors' age difference was a calculated decision on the show's part. At least, not in that way. It makes sense that networks wouldn't want characters with the most screen time to be restricted by child entertainment labor laws if it's easily avoidable. Still, that doesn't change that the actors' proximity and age makes their characters' relationship easier for the audience to accept. The show still benefits. In line with this, we could argue that the actor's attractiveness shapes the audience's perception too. In the same way that attractive actors' portrayals of real-life serial killers often minimizes the audience's negative perception of the crimes. Casting conventionally attractive actors to play these characters makes it much easier for audiences to accept or even support the relationships, no matter how problematic they are. Marlene King, on several occasions, has proclaimed that Aria and Ezra are soulmates.
They're soulmates. Even when they're not together, they're soulmates. I think Ezria are soulmates, and I have said whether they like it or not.
Where do we even start with this? A showrunner of any teen drama calling one of the show's couples soulmates is very telling to that showrunner's priorities and where those characters are going to end up. She's showing her hand entirely. There's no ambiguity here. She is loyal to this couple. I cannot think of a higher endorsement. And let's talk about that word. The whole thing about a soulmate is that you only have one. There's not a person in the entire world who could be a better match than your soulmate. And there's no logical way of knowing if someone is your soulmate. It's something that you feel. The idea of soulmates itself is a spiritual concept, which implies it is something that is above logic and society and laws. It's something that just is, something that can't be defined by rationale. What a dangerous message to send to a young audience. That despite the glaring problems with Aria and Ezra's relationship, the strength of this special, rare love transcends morals and laws, and whoever disagrees with this relationship is simply incapable of understanding. To have an entire network television show marketed to teenagers nurture and support that idea is so irresponsible. Teenagers who are notoriously known for being impulsive, lacking experience, and feeling romantic love more intensely. So, What does that mean for the 14-year-old fan who thinks her secret 22-year-old boyfriend is her soulmate? That they're meant to be together, so the people and laws that tell her they shouldn't be are wrong? Or the 16-year-old that dismisses her college boyfriend's abuse because no matter what happens, he's the only person who's made for her? How hypothetical are these scenarios really? Are they that much of a leap? And don't be fooled, this rhetoric sticks. Marlene King's words carried weight in this fandom. This is the woman who controlled what happened to the audience's favorite characters. She knew the actors and worked with them daily. To a 13-year-old fan on Tumblr, this woman was sitting at the head of the cool kids table. Marlene King, to her detriment, is very active on social media. You'd think the soulmate dialogue and the show's perpetuation, framing, and blatant romanticization of these relationships would be proof enough of Marlene's opinion, but she doesn't stop there. Some of these tweets are really bad. Look, I know that every produced teen drama series is created by adults. The majority of media created for teenagers is created by adults. And I know that teen shows have romance and sex in them, especially soapy dramas. And I understand that the adults who write those scenes are not doing anything wrong by writing them. R.I.P. to that one time John Green was attacked on Tumblr. But what is unsettling to me is the buddy-buddy way this 50-something-year-old woman interacted with a largely underage fan base on social media, publicly promoting this predatory relationship and teasing its upcoming sex scenes to young fans. There's a power dynamic here. Some of these kids worshipped her. And it wasn't just Marlene King. Maya Goldsmith, who worked on the show in its full run, starting from staff writer and eventually moving up to supervising producer, tweeted on more than one occasion that she would release Ezria spoilers or Ezria script pages in exchange for getting more followers on Twitter. Yeah, that does not look great. She told fans that if they got #FriskyWithFits trending, she would reveal if Aria and Ezra kiss in the upcoming season. I'll be honest, it all rubs me the wrong way. The phrasing, the inducements, the power dynamics between these kids who didn't know any better and these adults that did, I don't like it. I did not like looking for these tweets. I felt gross reading them. I'm trying to understand and imagine what the defense would be, but 2013 was not long enough ago for this to be considered remotely acceptable behavior.
I know, still it's complicated. It was a different time.
It wasn't a time before they invented laws, was it?
In the show's first seasons, connecting with fans on social media was a relatively new experience. Obviously, this was pre-TikTok. At the time, Facebook and Twitter were booming. Tumblr was worth almost $1 billion. Instagram launched 4 months after the pilot aired, and it blew up quickly. And there were a lot of fans who used these platforms to talk about the show. I'll admit, writers are notorious for being overshadowed in general, but especially when it comes to screenwriting. Yeah, they typically have more power in TV than in film, but often they still don't get enough credit. So being able to connect with fans this way, to take in their engagement and excitement head on, it must have felt good. It must have been a really big ego boost. I mean, one look at Marlene King's Instagram shows that she's still chasing that high. And I get it, that's human. But so many of these fans were kids. And they knew that. And I cannot sugarcoat or try to justify tweets like this. I cannot find a single instance where Marlene King has publicly posted, tweeted, written, or said anything directly addressing the illegal and predatory nature of Aria and Ezra's relationship. Which I guess isn't that surprising because really, what is she going to say? What logical reasoning could she use to defend a high school teacher dating his student? It's not like she's unaware. She can bend over backwards, dodging any discourse surrounding their relationship, or read an entire paragraph and cherry-pick the most irrelevant point to respond to. Given Marlene's tendency to shy away from acknowledging anything of actual importance on social media, it makes sense that the show turns the same blind eye to the age gaps and predatory dynamics. When the show finally does confront its underage relationships, it focuses its lens very deliberately and rarely on the underage problem. Instead, it looks at the next best ethical argument that's there, clings to it, and doesn't let go. For Aria and Ezra's relationship, it's the teacher-student elements and the ethical issues surrounding that. So practically any time the morality of their relationship comes up, the characters leech to very specific rhetoric involving Aria being Ezra's student, but rarely, if ever, do they acknowledge that she is 16. Like when Ezra's friend confronts him in season 1.
What? Ezra, she's cute. She's smart. I get it. There's no argument, but she's your student, man.
Or when Aria and Ezra tell her parents.
She wasn't my student then.
She wasn't your student then?
This happened while you were her teacher?
Their response does not once address Aria's age. The focus in their dialogue is solely on Ezra being Aria's teacher.
You said so yourself, there's barely any age difference.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not the point. He was her teacher.
The show even tries to compare and parallel Byron's romantic relationship with his student to Ezra's and Aria's, almost as if to equate them. Similarly, after Spencer and Wren kiss, all the conflict is put on the ethical dilemma of someone kissing their sister's fiancé, instead of the fact that this man was 24 and Spencer was 16, and all of the power dynamics that come with that. Their ages are complete non-factors. The way the show constantly chooses to avoid the underage problem is reminiscent of the red herring fallacy, a logical fallacy popular with politicians, in which information is presented in an attempt to distract from the main issue, often to avoid a question or shift the discussion in a new direction. By focusing solely on these situations instead of the ages, it's easier for the audience to naturally go with where the plot leads and not question anything else. And thus the show faces less potential criticism. I can only assume the show chooses to avoid the elephant in the room because they don't want their characters quoted verbally condoning underage relationships. But ignoring this problem makes it look like the creators don't believe there is a problem. And that's dangerous for an audience that might believe them. The opposing viewpoint seems to be, it's fictional. These aren't real people. It's just a TV show.
Totally condone it. I mean, it's one of these things where it's a television show.
But that argument negates the reality that exists, which is, whether we're aware of it or not, television and film influenced us deeply. This impact can be as simple as a trend or style. The Rachel, a haircut that Jennifer Aniston's character had on the show Friends, has its own Wikipedia page and currently over 83 billion views on TikTok. But TV and film can also impact public perception on important topics. This can be a good thing. Modern Family made large strides normalizing a same-sex couple raising a child through their characters Mitchell and Cameron, on top of including blended families and interracial couples. But TV can normalize things for bad, too. The Fox show 24 has been called out for normalizing torture. In James Ponowazik's book, Audience of One, Trump Television and the Fracturing of America, he writes, military officers had to deal with soldiers who now believed, because of 24, whose DVDs were passed around in Iraq, that torture worked. While everyone is influenced by TV and film in some capacity, I would argue that teenagers are typically more influenced than adults, which makes sense because they're trying to find out who they are, what the right way to be is. Of course they look to TV and film depicting people their own age and want to mimic popular characters' styles, personalities, behaviors, or actions. I remember when my friends and I threw our first high school party, we bought red plastic cups solely because they were featured in every single party scene from every teen movie we had ever watched. Movies that, on a subconscious level, we wanted to emulate. Yeah, it was relatively harmless, but still, it was a complete influence by the entertainment industry that normalized these cups.
I'm standing in the basement, and I'm holding a red cup. You've seen movies. And I'm standing there, and I'm holding a red cup.
The entertainment industry has a great deal of influence on our lives, from what we buy to what we wear to how we see the world. This isn't always nefarious, and sometimes, even when it isn't always intentional. But whether the effects are good or bad, they exist. And that's why it's the responsibility of the people who create television and film to be cognizant and careful with what they share with audiences, especially when those audiences are adolescent.
So what's the difference between writing for a teen show versus a show like Ugly Betty or a show with an older audience?
I don't think of that. I mean, I did Popular, I did Everwood, I've done many shows that are geared toward teens, but I've never changed what I write.
In season 4, it is revealed that Ezra knew who Aria was before they met. Like in the pilot at the bar, he was writing a book on Allison. And this changes everything. I need to acknowledge there is not a shred of doubt in my mind that during the development of season 1, Marlene King or any of the other producers or writers had even considered this plot twist. The conception of this idea probably didn't even happen until they started writing season 4. Now, obviously, I can't prove it, but considering the show in its entirety and all of its impulsive and anomalous plot lines, I feel confident that this was one of them, and total retcon. Which just makes it so much more bizarre. This recontextualizes their entire relationship. As if this man wasn't creepy enough already, this puts him on a whole other level. It means he stalked Aria and S8'd her through deception. It means he sat alone in his apartment and individually cut out these pictures and glued them to a poster like a little arts and crafts project. The only justification this show had for their relationship was that at the bar, in the pilot, Ezra did not know how old Aria was when they met and made out. That distinction was the only thing they had going for them, ethically. That was the one thing. The minuscule, flimsy, broken leg they were standing on. Granted, that shred of morality went out the door the moment he continued a relationship with her after realizing she was his student and 16. But that didn't stop the show from clutching onto that one fact like a life preserver.
She's your student, man. That's not how I met her.
And 3 seasons later, they're willingly going to take the tiny gram of moral grayness that they used as a halo over their entire relationship and just rip it all up. All this choice does is make him so much creepier than he already was. I can't wrap my head around it. It's not every day you see that level of self-sabotage. I genuinely can't tell if it stemmed from idiocy or apathy. Look, I'll be candid. I hate this plotline. I know it's absolute gold in my argument. It's the equivalent of if I was a hunter and a deer shot itself in front of me. But I can't stand that they added this because it minimizes the reality presented in the previous seasons and makes what we thought their relationship was look guileless by comparison. This happens. This is a reality that we see all the time. But this, some guy getting a teaching job to interact with a specific group of high school girls and planting himself in one of their lives to write a book on her missing friend, that is beyond the realm of possibility. And the problem with this is it can create a dissonance with viewers' perceptions of teacher-student relationships and their standards of what they find acceptable. And honestly, the sad thing is, this could have been the best plot twist in the entire show. Hell, in the entire genre of teen dramas. Can you imagine? So much of the very young audience rooted for this illicit relationship. They were written in the stars. No one understood them. #Ezria. And then bam, it was all a lie. He groomed the protagonist and he groomed the audience, and the whole time he was a predator. And yes, he's a predator either way. But this would have been dramatic and digestible for a younger audience, and it would have pushed a valuable message while still maintaining a big plot twist. But of course, that's not what happened. What actually happened enrages me. In the episode She's Come Undone, written by Jonelle Lennon, Aria tries to process all of her emotions following the reveal of Ezra's secret. Aria writes a letter entailing her high school experience with him. The letter says, "I am a student at Rosewood High School, and I have had a sexual relationship with my former teacher, Ezra Fitz, since I was a sophomore until now. I have been too ashamed to come forward, but I have come to realize Mr. Fitz is a twisted, conniving predator, and I need to stop him from doing this to anyone else. He needs to be charged with exploiting a teenager when he was in a position of power." Aria goes to the principal's house to give him the letter, but Hannah stops her before she can.
Look, if this gets out, it's gonna hurt you too. It will be in the papers all over town.
Let's get something out of the way. Hannah Marin is one of, if not the most popular protagonist on Pretty Little Liars. She's typically the comic relief and the character that refreshingly says what's on her mind, and because of that, she frequently ranks as the most liked Pretty Little Liar on polls. So having Hannah, a fan favorite protagonist, dissuade Aria from coming forward against her abuser is so incredibly irresponsible. Relationships like Aria and Ezra's exist. It's hard to know exact numbers because many of them stay secret. Even though teaching unions say that they're very rare, a YouGov survey found that 1 in 6 adults knew of someone who had had an intimate relationship with a teacher while at school. And that's just teachers. That's not counting coaches or friends' parents or camp counselors. Whatever role the adult has, they apply just the same to the victims who watch this show and see their situations reflected in Aria and Ezra's.
If you tell Principal Hackett about your relationship, Ezra's not just going to suffer, he's going to go to jail.
And the reality is, many victims don't come forward because these relationships are complicated. Or they do, but they feel guilty about speaking up, and then don't because they'd blame themselves for what would end up happening to their abuser. The victim doesn't always see it as, if I come forward, they will face the negative consequences of their actions. For many people, it's, if I come forward, I am the sole reason that they will face negative consequences. Even though it's not true, that feeling of self-blame is all too real, and it's another lingering effect of control the abuser has on their victim. So for Pretty Little Liars to essentially tell the audience that she would be in the wrong for coming forward against this man because he would face the consequences of his own actions is a gross abuse of power and influence. Honestly, it makes me sick. And to top it all off, when Aria decides not to tell, Hannah then says,
"You did the right thing."
I can't believe this aired on TV. I can't believe this got through a writer's room. There are so few lucky people that get to make TV shows and be the one that has the creative control over the plot and the direction and the characters and the dialogue. That's not a job that you can apply for on LinkedIn. And even if you are on the ladder of staff writer, it's never a guarantee that you'll be able to run your own show one day. To be one of those few, to have the power and the platform where you can say, well, evidently pretty much anything, to use it to tell your young audience that a protagonist is right for staying silent against her abuser that groomed her, stalked her, and SA'd her by deception, it's not okay. Not when your show's demographic is girls under the age of 18, and 1 in 9 girls under the age of 18 experience SA. And even after all of this, Ezra and Aria end up together. In the series finale, they get married. But of course they do, because let's not forget, they're soulmates. They are destined to get back together because they are made for each other. No matter what Ezra does to Aria, it doesn't matter because they're meant to be together. And whatever ups and downs Aria faces, it only makes them stronger. So not only does love triumph predation, but love triumphs abuse too. What other message could the viewer possibly receive from this ending? Marlene King believes Ezra goes to prison in the books. I mean, he doesn't. He's placed under arrest, but the school decides not to press charges, and then he moves to Rhode Island and comes back for like a couple of books later. You would think the showrunner would know that, but whatever. The point is, Marlene King thinks he goes to prison. She believes that in the books, he faces legal ramifications for engaging in a relationship with his student. So I'm sorry, who asked for this? Why was there such a push to continue this plotline when it is comparatively so brief and irrelevant in the source material? And not just continue, but rewrite, reframe, recontextualize entirely. Of course, except for the parts that would ethically improve it. Why would they do it? Marlene King says it was a push from fans who liked the teacher-student relationship in the books. But even if that is true, it's a horrible reason. The tweens who read these books are not at fault for liking this relationship. In the same vein, a child wouldn't be at fault for having a crush on an adult. If the child expressed romantic interest in the adult, it would be the adult's responsibility to enforce boundaries because children cannot consent. To parallel this logic back, even though some kids liked Aria and Ezra's relationship in the books, Marlene King, a 47-year-old adult woman at the time, should not have expanded, romanticized, and exposed this relationship to a young, impressionable, and much larger audience. So why didn't anyone step in and stop it? I can only assume the network allowed this fictional relationship to continue developing because, 1, there wasn't enough negative backlash from parents or the press to feel real pressure to do anything about it, and 2, because it was a very popular ship among its young and impressionable audience, it made the show more popular and thus made the network more money. Prioritizing profit over ethics, unfortunately, is not a novel concept in the entertainment industry. In 2016, Leslie Moonves, alleged predator and disgraced ex-chairman and CEO of CBS, said of Donald Trump's campaign, "It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS." And let's not forget, Ezra and Aria, Wren and Spencer, both of these couples were introduced with a romantic context in the pilot, which ranked #1 in its key demographics, and the very next episode retained 100% of its premiere audience, which is rare for any show. So why would execs want to change anything that might put that number at risk? If anything, if someone were to look at it in a purely financial sense, the popularity from the young viewers is an incentive to nurture these fictional relationships to make more money. Cue the merchandise. Like many TV shows and franchises, Pretty Little Liars had their own line of clothing and accessories, some of which alluded to Aria and Ezra's relationship. They were fully licensed by Warner Bros. And were even promoted by the actors. Looking back now, this is just gross, honestly. If I was to only use one piece of evidence to back up the claim that Pretty Little Liars wanted its tween audience to support a teacher-student adult-minor relationship, this shirt would be it. This is damning. And it's not even I Heart Ezra Fits or I Heart Ezra. It's I Heart Mr. Fits, pointing out the insanely skewed power dynamic and both romanticizing and fetishizing it in the same breath. Delia's went under and Warner Bros. Wisely stripped Hot Topic of any controversial t-shirts. But there is still Ezra-positive merchandise on Amazon that claims it is fully licensed, so make of that what you will. In an incredible interview, Deadline asked Marlene King, in terms of the standards of ABC Family, where do they draw the line? Marlene King responded, they definitely do. They draw the line at bad behavior without consequences. That is their line. If someone shows bad behavior, it can't go unpunished or unnoticed. What a great quote. It's very ironic, considering unpunished and unnoticed seems to be the network's modus operandi for underage relationships in the show. But seriously, what a wonderful code to live by for a network like ABC Family. I'm sorry, Freeform.
When a person is bad, that person has to be taught a lesson.
Person? And for a network that supposedly believes in consequences for bad behavior, I find it very funny that none of these predators seem to answer for theirs. So what does that mean? That the network doesn't believe these characters' actions are unethical? That the network's integrity is amenable when profits are involved? Or that consequences only apply to their underage characters? But wait, Marlene did not say this rule exclusively pertains to the teen protagonists. She said someone, meaning characters.
He meant to say, when a child is bad. Instead, he said, when a person is bad, and thereby introduced a revolutionary idea.
Following ABC Family / Freeform's own alleged moral code, as generously outlined by Marlene King, to allow Ezra to marry Aria and have his happy ending, is to insinuate that he did nothing wrong. As easy as it would be to just blame these relationships on Marlene King, she is not the only one responsible. The truth is, a lot of people made this happen. And granted, some of those people had significantly more power than others and played larger roles because of that. Marlene King made the pitch that set these relationships in motion to thrive on TV. But ABC Family development executives approved it. And as the show continued, they continued approving it. The network apparently drew the line on characters smoking cigarettes and had serious conversations about whether or not to let Aria's brother push his mom. But they allowed this relationship to happen and end on a positive note. As much as I wish the actors did, I don't blame them for not approaching their characters' relationship with the same criticism Robert Pattinson and Penn Badgley expressed to their respective characters in Twilight and You. But if they weren't going to publicly condemn the relationship, the least they could have done was not outwardly endorse it. Lucy Hale supported the relationship throughout the entire show. In an Elle interview, she called them soulmates and said there was a pureness behind the relationship. And she unfortunately maintains this opinion in 2023. In an interview with TV Line about their characters' reference in the newest Pretty Little Liars spinoff, Original Sin, she said, I love it. I'm happy to know that Aria and Ezra are still kicking it. That's great. Team Aria and Ezra all the way. Ian Harding's a little harder to pin down. The fandom seems to believe he's very anti-Ezria, and there is some truth to that. In interviews, you can tell he's always been a little uncomfortable with it. Though there's nuance to some of his responses, that doesn't change the fact that he has very publicly justified and endorsed the relationship. In a TV Guide interview, he called them soulmates and said that his character is a great guy at heart. Both actors had a role, and they should have been more careful with what they said. Though they didn't create the character storylines, they had a huge audience outside of the show that was hanging on to their every word, and in many ways, they benefited from it. Critics could have done more. They should have pushed back harder and tried to shame the relationship from the start. Instead of Genia Belafonte's tasteless joke in her New York Times review, she could have written something with much better judgment. Not enough people criticized the show's romanticized depictions of predatory relationships during the series run. But in recent years, more people have spoken out against the show and creators for normalizing these relationships. This sudden attention raises the question, why now? What happened between 2010 and 2023 that made people suddenly care? Well, we grew up. The tweens that watched the pilot when it aired are all in their early 20s. The 16-year-olds that ran Ezria blogs and wore the merch are turning 30 next year. With age, our lenses changed, and we could finally see these relationships for what they always were. And I hate that. I hate that we had to grow up to realize what these adults knew the entire time was wrong. And the craziest thing is, for a lot of us, we could go through 2 more entire decades of living and growing and learning, and we still would not be as old as Marlene King was when she made that pitch. In the past few years, many streaming platforms, including HBO Max and Disney Plus, have retroactively gone back and added intro disclaimers addressing problematic scenes or depictions in their content. In the grand scheme of things, it might seem like a crumb, but I really like that those companies are making these choices, not to shove their films under the rug and pretend like they didn't happen, but to acknowledge that certain aspects of them are not and were never okay. Taking accountability is always better than silence, and it's substantially more meaningful when it's given before it's demanded. As of today, Pretty Little Liars is available to stream on Hulu and Max. Currently, neither platforms include disclaimers detailing the underage relationships and predatory nature reflected in the show's material. Well, that's it, I guess. I absolutely did not intend to exceed 20 minutes on this video, but ain't that just the way? If you're already logged in and you want to support me, please subscribe. I cringe my whole body tenses up, but it is so hard for me to say that because it's so embarrassing. Like, please subscribe are the 2 most embarrassing words on the planet. But please subscribe.